give just a brief 5–10 minute overview as to the latest that's been going on with this community and with our book and all kinds of other stuff. We also have Gillian Armstrong on the line. She's an Amazon ML hero. So say hello, Gillian.
Hey.
Okay, excellent. She's going to give a talk on serverless machine learning. And serverless here, we're not necessarily talking about Lambda. We're talking about, the higher level AI services as well, where you come at it from, more of a business need standpoint and less of an infrastructure standpoint. So very excited about this talk today. And also Antje gave a talk on Friday at a conference that I asked her to spend a couple minutes today talking about. So it's on Kubeflow pipelines and how to integrate with SageMaker. And so super excited about that. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably start with the Antje talk for about 5 or 10 minutes after my talk or my intro. And then we'll hand everything over to Gillian and have a conversation. And so I think that's how we'll proceed. If there's time left at the end, there's always more stuff to show, but let's do that for now. So you can see my screen here. If you're not familiar, Antje and I have been working on this book called Data Science on AWS. This is with the O'Reilly Media, and we're waiting for reInvent, which is later on this year. There's lots of new and exciting features coming out, so we're going to include all those in the book. And we'll then release the book shortly after reInvent, so early 2021. There's also a quick plug for the workshop. There's a workshop here. So Antje, can you post a link to the workshop everywhere in Slack and in Zoom here? And all of the code that Antje will be showing also lives in this code. So this is the GitHub repo. And then we've got all of these videos, including today's video, will be posted in this video link. And if you want early access to the book, please give us your email there. We have actually never sent an email outbound, but when we are ready to release, we will send you 1 or 2 emails giving you discount codes, all kinds of other fun stuff. Please follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn. Also, one thing to note, we added this, which is a whole ton of talk titles that we have based on our work with the book. We've actually spawned about 22 talks. And if you are familiar with any conferences around the world, maybe you could recommend us or some of these talks. So we'll be speaking, I think, probably about 10 to 15 conferences between now and the end of the year, and a lot of that material comes from this list here. So, okay, so I think, and there is a workshop this Saturday. It starts at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and we would love to have you on there. Every attendee gets their own temporary Amazon account, and you don't have to litter or clutter up your Amazon account. We will actually give you a fresh one, and we will tear it down at the end. But all the code is all open source. It's all found on this code link right here. So we're just basically git cloning that exact repo and then working through all the examples together. So pretty exciting stuff. We cover Kubeflow, we cover BERT, and PyTorch, XGBoost, SageMaker, all kinds of fun stuff. It's a very long day, but you will definitely learn something no matter what your skill set is. So just as long as you have basic familiarity with Python and SQL and some fundamental computer science stuff, you should be okay. You certainly don't need a PhD in machine learning to participate. Okay, so one other thing real quick, and I won't go into this too much, but I've spent the last week actually working with contextual bandits and using reinforcement learning with SageMaker. So some of these notebooks will be moved into the mainline repo, the same repo that can be found here on the code. Probably later this week, I do plan to demo this and to include this in the workshop on Saturday. So, but yeah, just so you know, I've been doing lots of work where we're building multiple BERT models and then pinning them against each other using multi-arm bandits. So basically similar to an A/B test, but we're doing multi-arm bandits where we could slowly shift traffic over. So here's an example. We're all data driven, I'm sure, on this call, so we like charts. And so here's an example where we're exploring model A first and seeing, and then actually, you know, B gets better, and then like ultimately ends up choosing the model B. So this is something I could talk about more at the very end if there's time. Yes, otherwise we will cover it on Saturday. Saturday's workshop will be recorded as well, so if you can't make it, and but I do highly recommend that you try to make it. And if you can't make it Saturday, we do them monthly through the end of the year. So that same link here gives you the option to select a date. Okay, and I think at this point, I'll hand it over to Antje. Antje, maybe 10 minutes or so, 10, 15, and then we'll give the rest of the time to Gillian. I think Gillian's, yes, how much time do you think you need, Gillian? Yeah, how much time do you think it'll go? Maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes? Okay, so I'll just hand it over to Antje and take it away, Antje.
I'll do. So yeah, let me quickly share my screen. I think let me see. No, I can't start my video, folks, so sorry for that. Zoom settings, but I'll share my screen here and switch over to my presentation. And I'm gonna hide all my floating panels here to actually see what I'm presenting. All right, so as Chris said in the beginning, I prepared this talk for a conference last week, and I just wanted to quickly show you and give a sneak peek into how to build end-to-end machine learning workflows with Kubeflow pipelines, and also how to integrate them, for example, with Amazon SageMaker. So quick introduction here. I think Chris introduced us already. So yeah, working as a senior developer advocate for AI and machine learning at AWS. Have a long history in the IT industry, worked for Cisco and MapR, and I'm also very active in the women in big data space. All right, so quickly on this topic here. So I've prepared a couple of slides on why machine learning with containers, and specifically then with Kubernetes. And I'm going to show you a demo, and I'm just going to take the short track and jump pretty quickly into the demo part to show you how to get started with Kubeflow pipelines, and also how you can run the integration using Amazon SageMaker components for Kubeflow pipelines to also integrate from Kubeflow to, for example, SageMaker to train your models. All right, so quick note on why are we even talking about doing machine learning with containers. And if you've been working on your machine learning projects, you might know that there's a complexity depending on which frameworks you're using. Maybe you're working with TensorFlow, maybe colleagues of yours work with PyTorch. You're pulling in all kind of libraries, maybe to visualize, to do some feature engineering. So pretty soon your environment becomes pretty complex. And containers really give us the capability to package not only training code, but also together with all the dependency and all the configuration, and make the environment very lightweight and portable. So it's easy to take a container and just spin it up on a different platform, and you have all of your dependencies and the code together. And then once we scale, obviously, we need a platform that helps us to orchestrate containers. And over the last years, Kubernetes really has become kind of what people call the operating system of containers. So it's definitely helping with the scheduling and the resource consumption and distribution of containers. And it gives us basically the three big advantages. One is composability, meaning you can develop components and then reuse them. And also the portability, meaning wherever Kubernetes runs, whether it's on-premise, whether it's on your laptop, you can also run it in the cloud. It helps you to port your applications as well. And then definitely also for the scalability. So Kubernetes comes with a lot of functionality, especially auto-scaling of resources, etc. So a lot of good reasons. And if you don't want to spend a lot of time maintaining Kubernetes, there's also the capability of running Kubernetes in the cloud. So there's a couple of managed Kubernetes services. For example, Amazon offers the Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS, which gives you a managed Kubernetes control plane, and you can focus your time then on attaching your data plane and spinning up your applications, your pods. And you will have a native upstream Kubernetes experience, and it really helps you to kind of have an enterprise-grade platform to run those pods on. And obviously integrated with a lot of other services in case you're using AWS already. All right, and also another thing that AWS offers, talking about those containers, is predefined and prepackaged Docker container images that are prepared to run your TensorFlow, PyTorch, MXNet environments. And you can leverage them for example, single or even multi-node training and inference. So you don't have to start completely from scratch developing those Docker images. All right, coming quickly to a little bit of the roles, and then we have the demo. So depending on which role you are, and I gave this talk at an ML Ops conference, so the audience was primarily machine learning practitioners and ML Ops team members. And depending on where you're coming from, you have different goals, right? So the machine learning practitioner obviously would just focus on developing the end-to-end workflows and caring really less about the infrastructure. Another important thing is how easy it is to share and collaborate with team members. Can I track and manage my experiments, and more tasks like that, especially maybe also like hyperparameter tuning, options, etc. So you really want to focus on the actual task at hand. Whereas the ML Ops team then needs to kind of implement the platform that is enabling you, right? So the ML Ops team members need to think about the platform, the characteristics, the requirements, how to abstract the infrastructure for the ML practitioners, how to deal with authentication, authorization, making it a multi-tenant platform if you have multiple teams and members accessing it and working on it. And the more people you have, obviously you also need to look at how to manage resource and quota. So kind of two forces here that need to work together. And this is basically the idea behind Kubeflow. So Kubernetes has emerged as kind of a platform to develop and serve applications. And Kubeflow is the ML toolkit that has been ported to run machine learning workflows as well in Kubernetes. And Kubeflow is not just a single product, it's basically an ecosystem of projects. And if you're familiar with Kubernetes, you might be aware of this cloud-native ecosystem. So there's a lot of projects going on in the community which you can leverage. And as part of Kubeflow, for example, we have Jupyter environments as our notebooks. We have components to run training jobs and also to serve models. And one of the most popular ones is definitely the Kubeflow Pipelines project. And behind pipelines, the idea is really to help you building up those machine learning pipelines. And looking at the pipelines, obviously, it's another very complex use case in itself, which starts pretty much at the data ingestion, data analysis, data transformation, validation part before you can even start with the model training pipeline. So obviously the core task then, once you have the data prep finished, is how to train the model, validate and train at scale before you can deploy the model and serve predictions. And Kubeflow Pipelines gives you a very nice user interface for managing and tracking experiments, the jobs and runs, and pretty much organized in kind of a DAG, a direct acyclic graph, as you can see here on the screenshot. So every step is executed and each component is basically executed as its own container, or in Kubernetes language, pod. And it gives you also an SDK which you can use to basically build those. So how does a Kubeflow pipeline look like? So here you can see the steps, and each step is made of a component. And as I just said, the components are implemented as containers. You have inputs and outputs, and you obviously have some metadata describing the step. And then you can basically line up those components, those pipeline steps in the right order, and this creates your Kubeflow pipeline. So the individual steps, and then we jump into just a quick demo here, is you start with writing your application or model code. So you have a Python file. And then as a next step, you would have to build a Docker container image that is kind of running that Python script. And once you have this bundled together, you would then create the pipeline component. And there you can use the Python decorator function that is coming with a specific domain-specific language from Kubeflow pipelines to transform this into a component. And then you're adding those components as you need. And then you can create the pipeline, again, using, for example, the decorator function that transforms those steps into the Kubeflow pipeline. And then in the last step, you compile the pipeline, and then you can run it. And here's an example. And I'm going to show you this in a demo, which is just way nicer than looking at the code here. So let's actually jump into the demo. And I'm going to switch over to my browser window here. And the preparation I've done, which I'm not showing today due to the time, but what I've done is basically I've started an Kubernetes cluster. So here I'm logged into my AWS console. And I've started a managed Kubernetes environment, which is called EKS. So you can see here I have a cluster up and running in the cloud. And I also installed Kubeflow on top of this cluster. So think of Kubeflow as just yet another application running on this Kubernetes cluster. And here you have the UI, so it comes with a pretty nice dashboard. And you can see on the left side here the different components. So for example, the notebook server. So one step I've also done in preparation is to spin up a Jupyter notebook server where I can execute my code. And inside of that notebook, I then started a pipeline. And here you can see just the Kubeflow pipelines 101. I call it the Hello World example. Gonna zoom in a little bit here. And here I can show you how you get started with Kubeflow pipelines. So the first step is really to install the SDK. So I'm pulling in here KFP, which is the Kubeflow Pipelines SDK for Python. I double check that my domain-specific language is available. So you can see here doing a which command that I have this here installed as well. And with that, I can start building a simple pipeline. So first of all, I need to create a container image for each component. And in this case, we're actually using a Docker image, a Python image. So we're doing very easy hello world, which consists of just adding two numbers together. And for adding numbers together, I can just leverage a Python image here. And then I'm running a command. So I'm executing the python-c command and basically adding up those numbers and writing out the results in a results.txt file. And you can see here that this function is returning my container op component. I'm also describing here an echo component. So this one is really just echoing the result of the sum of the two numbers. All right, and with those very simple functions, I can start building the pipeline. So here you can see I'm using the decorator function dsl.pipeline, give it a name, give it a description, and I'm calculating the sum, and I'm using here 4 input numbers. And my sum 1 is adding up the first two, and I'm adding up the second two, and then I'm creating the total sum out of those results from the summarizations before. And then the last step here is to echo out the final result. So pretty much a hello world example. And next step, as I said, is to compile. So I'm using the KFP compiler here and passing this pipeline. And then I can pretty much deploy. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating an experiment, which is giving me kind of a logical grouping. And then I'm running the pipeline, which we created above. And with that, I can jump into the pipelines section of my Kubeflow installation. And you can see here, I created an experiment called AWS. And I'm clicking in here, you see the calculate sum pipeline. And this executed before, right? So you see here the different steps in my pipeline. You see the input outputs, those are the sums here. And not much more happening. You have the second sum here, which are the other two numbers. I'm creating the summarization out of those two. And then I'm echoing the final result. And this one actually runs an echo command. So this one, if you click here on the logs, you see the final result. And this is really a very, very easy example. If you're interested in seeing a little bit more complex, we also do have an example in here, and this is all in our GitHub repo, which I guess Chris is already posting in all the Slack channels and chats. Here's an example of how you can customize those components. And AWS has developed components specifically to integrate with Amazon SageMaker out of Kubeflow. So in this case here, I'm installing a Python SDK to integrate with AWS, which is Bodo. I'm installing Kubeflow pipelines. And the difference here, after you set up how you access your AWS account and have access to an S3 bucket for your data, is to load those SageMaker components. So there's a component to train a model, to create the actual model artifact and the model registered in SageMaker, also to deploy the model, and we do another step here showing how you can run batch inference as well. So those are a couple of components we're pulling in, and with those I can actually create my pipeline. So here's an example of a more complex pipeline. We're setting region information, storing images in which are stored in S3 buckets. So we also provide sample Docker images here to use a built-in k-means algorithm, which is part of SageMaker. And here you can see the pipeline. So we're giving it a name again, a description, and so we're building up a little bit more complex pipeline. So in this case, we want to do an MNIST classification. And here we're setting up the training step, where we can also define instance types and instance counts. So as you can see here in the meta information, we're spinning this on 2 cloud instances, which are called the MLC4 8x large. We're adding create model step here. And then we can deploy that model as an endpoint, and we can run some batch transformations. And here's again the step to compile the pipeline and to run it. And I'll jump back here into my AWS account, and I'm showing you how this ends up. So once you compile this, you can obviously see this in the Kubeflow pipelines dashboard, but we can also see that the training job now is started in the cloud. So here you can see the training job that got executed as part of the SageMaker platform. We can see here it finished. It ran for 45 seconds, so you're only getting billed also for 45 seconds in this example. You could use spot training instances as well. And here you can see the instance types which we defined previously in the Kubeflow pipeline. So this is the training job. And we also have the model being created. So here's a model entry. And with the model, we deploy to a real-time endpoint, which you can now use, for example, to integrate into your services, into your applications. And also, we ran a batch transformation job. So this is a good example how you can actually use your Kubeflow pipelines UI and setup, but execute the actual training jobs, for example, on AWS if you need to scale out, if you need to leverage, for example, GPU instances for some training jobs, etc. And you also have here the actual pipeline visible in the Kubeflow pipelines dashboard UI. All right, and this was just a quick walk through how you can get started with Kubeflow pipelines, how you can start building those, and how you can also leverage integrations, for example, to Amazon SageMaker. And with that, I'd say I hand over to Chris, and then we'll have Gillian here presenting. And happy to answer any questions in the Slack channel as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Antje. Great talk. I posted a link to all of the videos from this conference that Antje did this talk for, so they're in the Slack. Please join the Slack over there. Example notebooks, GitHub. So please move all chat to Slack. GitHub we'll put here. And next up is Gillian Armstrong. Gillian, do you want to grab the screen share and introduce yourself and guide us through your narrative?
Sure. I was going to turn my video, but it doesn't seem to come on, so that's fine. Let's see, stop to. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing my screen now.
We do.
Yep,
Excellent.
looks good. We can hear you, we can see you. Yep, or see your screen anyway.
So I'm going to keep it fairly casual. So any questions, jump in. Chris, Antje can redirect them to me from Slack. And Chris and Antje, please jump in as well. Let's have a conversation. So way back when I was a brand new graduate, the application that I worked on ran on 2 servers in production, Boncliffe and Sugarloaf. Named for 2 lovely mountains in New Hampshire in America, close to where those actual servers were. That's Boncliffe the mountain. And on my very first business trip to America, my US colleagues were super, super keen that I got to see
Yeah, hey Antje, can you still hear Gillian? Sorry.
No, drop for me as well, Gillian. We can't
Yeah,
hear you.
Gillian, can you start over from like about 30 seconds ago? Still can't hear you. Give us a few moments, folks. Got to get Gillian back on the audio.
Here we go. Is that it back?
Yeah, perfect.
I have no idea what happened. So where did you get to in my exciting story?
Basically after the New Hampshire and then maybe, yeah, like right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. This is a data center where my lovely servers were running. And I got to go and visit them and stand in front of them and feel the heat of my code running. And I was like super excited because those were the actual servers that I got called about in the middle of the night if they went down. And I asked if I could take a photo. And you're definitely not allowed to take photos in data centers, but he let me. And so I had a photo on my desk of our servers for a long time that's now sadly lost. And so what I want to tell you today is that I'm Gillian, and I don't know what any of my servers are called today, and I'm okay with that. And I want to talk to you about the freedom of the ephemeral cloud and how it's okay to let mystery cloud people look after some of your things, even your AI. I work in Liberty IT in Belfast in Northern Ireland. And there we focus on creating solutions for our parent company, Liberty Mutual. I'm a software developer, and most of my work over the past few years has been focused on AI and cloud technologies. So the title is Applying a Serverless-First Mindset. So first thing we need to get out of the way is, what is a serverless mindset? Well, your mind might be jumping to serverless technologies, and from a technology perspective, you have definitions like an application that costs you nothing to run when no one is using it, except data storage, that'll get you. Or assembling your application using pay-per-use managed services. So your mind's now full of managed X or X as a service, or maybe just full of Lambda. But we're actually talking about is serverless mindset. And serverless technology is just an enabler for serverless mindset. Because a serverless mindset is that relentless focus on functionality by offloading as many concerns as possible. Or if you prefer, a focus on business value. So what we do in software when we're thinking about building software is that we start at the start, and we always prefer to rent before we buy and only then build. Because if I rent, say for instance, my servers that I'm running my code on, then someone else is looking after them, and it's a massive win because it gets rid of all that work and I can just focus on writing my business logic. So how does that apply to AI? Well, in a typical large enterprise, there are likely a number of data scientists and machine learning specialists, no doubt, many of whom are on this call listening, lots of people who know all about data science and machine learning. But then there are also likely a whole heap of software engineers who don't really know much about machine learning, but AI has become really critical to the company, and it's starting to get integrated into every application. And we've got a small amount of data scientists and a lot of software engineers. So how do we utilize that group to augment the data scientists more effectively? So we're now at a point where the cloud has not only democratized AI, but it has actually commoditized AI. So we have things like this, the AWS machine learning stack, and other clouds are available, but we'll just talk about AWS today. And at the top, we have managed AI services. And they're the ones we can connect into our applications like those other serverless blocks. And this is a wee analogy that we use sometimes. So if we imagine that machine learning is butter, at the very top layer, I just go to the shop and buy some butter. And when I go down a level, I can go to the farmer and I can buy some raw milk. I can skim it and I can churn my own butter. So we've got those nice managed toolkits in the middle, like SageMaker. But I've had to buy his churn and I've had to look after it now, and still had to put in some effort. But if I wanted to really do it right, really make the best butter in the entire world, I could just go and buy a cow. But then I have to look after a cow. It's a big upfront investment. A cow needs somewhere to live. Even if I don't want butter anymore, I'm stuck with this cow. So if you are trying out butter for the first time, if you're thinking, I don't know if I need it at all, probably going to buy a cow isn't a really sensible thing to do. But equally, if nobody owns any cows, then there's no butter for anyone. So what are your advantages of just buying the butter? Well, the first is a more pure benefit of the serverless mindset, so rapid delivery of business value. And the second is a side effect, but a really useful one. And it is a path to machine learning upskilling across a wider group of people. So not just software developers, but actually managers and business people and all sorts of people in your company. So first off, that rapid delivery of business value. If you want to explore the use of AI to solve some of your business problems, especially within existing systems, the AI services offer a way to experiment really quickly with very little or maybe no upfront investment. And it can allow you to do things like demonstrate the art of the possible to your business. And that can be really important in getting funding to actually build out your AI solution, which can be really important if you want to bring on a specialist, or you want to invest that upfront time in really making something great. You'll have to secure your buy-in, you'll have to get the time and the funding. At the moment, I'm working in what we call one of our explore teams. People rotate in and out of these. And these teams take a business area or a set of business problems, and they spend a few months, usually about 3, investigating how they could be solved. Now, generally, there would be a focus on emerging technology. However, if we can fix your problem with a web form or a regex, then that is what we will recommend to you. But these efforts can start with relatively low context and often with very little real data. So being able to show a set of different things that could happen with something that's familiar, if not the specific things they need, can be a really powerful way of sort of encouraging people and bringing them along. And it can also expose where solutions may be feasible, but not desirable. And alongside that, you can get pretty low-cost prototypes using those pay-as-you-go services. You aren't paying for a full build-out if you only have a couple of users. If you're using the pay-as-you-go services, it doesn't really matter whether there's only 2 calls a day or 2,000 calls a day. They aren't all cheap. I did see last month Kendra being used, which is quite expensive and can quickly bankrupt you when you try it out, although awesome. And you know what? If the AI services actually meet your needs, so say you're building a nice little Lex bot or something, great. You can stop there. You've offloaded some of the maintenance. You don't have to go and get your Kubernetes out. Perfect. And the load and scaling and stuff all managed for you. But then we've got the secondary benefit, which is that the AI services can be used for more than that. They can actually provide an entry for people in machine learning. So not trying to reskill everyone as a machine learning specialist, but helping everyone understand what machine learning is and being able to use it and talk about it effectively. So if we look at that machine learning stack from before, we aren't looking to move everyone down to the bottom layers, but we want to let some people do that if they have interest and aptitude. And we want to get some of the data scientists and the software engineers to mingle more and have more empathy for each other. And we want to get the software engineers to know about the AI world and the data scientists to maybe start using more of the managed tooling available to ensure that they're focusing on business value and offloading as much as they can. Now, imagine most people on this call, you do already know lots about machine learning. But how do you bring other people along? If you've got people in your company and they don't know about machine learning, how can you get them to sort of learn more and quickly find out sort of where is machine learning going to be a differentiator for your company? Well, okay, so why not just start at the bottom and make sure everyone has the fundamentals before going and doing things? Well, if we go back to that serverless mindset and a clear focus on business value, the different types of algorithms are not actually the most important thing to learn first. So what are the things and how can those AI services help us? Well, this is the very first project I worked on that actually used any of the AI services. It's actually my first introduction to any AI. It was Lex back when there was only it and Poly and recognition. And it was also my first time building cloud native or serverless, so I was learning a lot. But I want to walk through what I learned about machine learning sort of entering from that direction. Now, I can't give you the code for that. And also the one I'm working on currently is all about ingesting lots of different things that come into the insurance industry, lots of different medias, and being able to process that through and make sense of them. So in the spirit of reuse, I have pulled on a lovely pre-built AWS solution. This one is the AWS content analysis solution. And I've picked it because it is somewhat similar to what we're doing at the moment, which is, taking in all that unstructured data and sort of making sense of it. And we've got 4 AI services used as part of the flow. In this one, transcribe, translate, comprehend, and recognition. And I'm super happy to talk about this, to talk about how we're using some of the AI services combined with other things, if people want to ask questions later. So once you've deployed it out, you'll get a nice front end, and I'm going to show that running in a minute. But before you go and click on that link and deploy, let me give you some tips. So called Don't Be Like Gillian. So firstly, all the resources are named based on the name you give the stack. So don't put AWS in the name. Don't call it AWS Content Analysis Stack because it's not allowed for some things like Cognito, and it will fail. And keep it short, or you'll go over the 63 character limit for S3 buckets, and then it will also fail. So, and of course, standard disclaimer, watch your costs. So while the AI services here are all pay as you go, there's a lot of data services in here. Elasticsearch is the big one. So it will cost you probably about $10 a day. So if you spin it up, just make sure you take it down as soon as you don't need it. So let's jump over. So this is it here. So I've uploaded a few different things. You'll see I've got the video from last month. We've done some analysis on it. Now, the first thing, Chris, Antje, I think you need to get onto the recognition team because your names are not in the celebrity list. So it's clearly not working properly. It's not, I mean, I would put in a bug report right away. So we'll see that you have loads of different things in the ML vision. It's identified lots of different objects. We've got celebrities, we've got moderation, we've got faces, and that's for the whole video. And you'll see that it actually, it's showing me exactly where the labels have been found in the video. It's got speech recognition tied in there too, so it's got a whole transcript. It's translated into Spanish. It's picked out key phrases, it's picked out the entities. So I've got people's names and locations. So really, really quickly, we have this like super powerful tool that's doing lots and lots of different things. So the question is then, having spun that up and run it, and if I was using this at work and running it, what would I learn? Well, firstly, the possibilities of AI. So you haven't had any exposure, you might not really know about what AI can and cannot do. And so that sample's got recognition, it's got transcribe, it's got translate and comprehend, but there are lots of others. So quiz time and no cheating. Who can name the other services? And Chris and Antje, I expect you to get every single one of these right. I don't know, How many more can you name for me?
Oh, geez. Yeah, Antje, can you name a guy? There's like so many now.
I know that you showed like 2 last week.
I know, totally. What else is there? So from a use case, so also built-ins too, which is kind of the next level down. We've been spending quite a bit of time there. So less on the vertical and more on, if we know the algorithm like XGBoost, we could go right to the built-in. But was it polytranslate? Textract is another one that we're seeing lots of traction there. That can take forms.
It's what I'm trying to use at the moment, actually.
Is it? Yeah, right. Can't put us on the spot like this, Gillian.
It's all part of the fun, right?
Yeah.
People are always naming them together.
Okay, well, I will release everyone from their misery. So there's 12 or maybe 13 or possibly more, depending on how you count them. These are all the ones there's logo for. In the stack diagrams, contact lens is often listed as well. You can start to break out some of these. Recognition obviously has video and photo. There is comprehend medical as well as comprehend. So there's a huge amount of services across a whole scale of different things. So if you want to figure out really quickly, okay, well, what sort of things can I do with AI? What, can I find out what's in pictures? Can I, transcribe? Can I, pull out all the locations? Well, you can really, really quickly go and try one of these and sort of start to learn about what is possible. The second one is to understand the complexities and limitations of AI. So if we go back to the demo for a moment, we'll do a little entity type. So down here we have lots and lots of different things. We have this lovely thing, and I read it and I was just delighted because in the title we've got Bird Reynolds. That's just amazing. And I went and I was like, Bird Reynolds, what? So when I went back and checked, the transcription has your lovely little Burt Reynolds chatbot called Bird Reynolds. And in fact, we've got a Bird NLP model. Now, T's and D's are very close. So I'm not surprised that Transcribe maybe got it wrong. But I'm guessing that, you're not working on a Bird NLP model, Chris, although that sounds amazing. But you see, okay, so 93% Bird Reynolds is a title of something. So, okay, right, it's not right. So what if I go back to the transcription then? Maybe it transcribed at low confidence. Well, actually, if I go back to the transcription, you'll see that the confidence in the transcription is pretty high. And I have had some people then suggest to me that you can take two different forms of machine learning and just sort of like average the confidence, and you'll get the overall confidence. So like if I did it in this case, I would be like so confident, like 90% confident that definitely Bird Reynolds was a title that was mentioned in your last podcast. Now obviously it was not. So you start to go, okay, well, gosh, machine learning can't solve everything for me. This is a bit of a disaster, especially if you are used to, this very sort of, it's right or wrong. I choose my button, it's blue or green. You're not used to this sort of like non-deterministic world. So the next thing you're learning as part of that is some of those basic concepts and terminology. So you've looked at it and you've seen confidence score and all sorts of things, and you're saying, okay, well, what does that mean? Alexa was my first one, and it did not have confidence score, but it does as of like last week, which is awesome. Love it. And then the next thing you're probably going to see is starting to understand that your business requirements are different now. So you're moving to this non-deterministic sort of world. You have to think, what is the machine learning question and not what is the business requirements, because business requirements, error check someone's email address, or here's the layout of the screen, are very different than, detecting, what the titles you mentioned in a podcast are. So that probably will start to get you thinking. And I really like this tweet. I saw it the other day where it says to replace programmers with robots, clients will have to accurately describe what they want, so we're safe. Although some days I am all for robots taking my job, 100%. So after you realize that now your business requirements are different, and hopefully you're realizing that and your business partners are realizing that, the next thing will probably start to occur to you, and depending on which service you're using, it may come quickly or a little bit slower, is how important data is. And everybody on this call knows that. But this is like really important when you're trying to like bring software developers along, is because who collects the data, who decides what way the data is collected and stored? Well, usually the developers, and they're usually thinking about it being displayed on a web page and not it being used in other ways. So starting to think about how your data should be stored, how you should capture it, what ways you should be able to access it, is really interesting. In the conversational AI space, that's really interesting because you're moving from this like big blocks of like web text to being able to sort of go back and forth with little bits of data, capture it in like a nonlinear way. So it's a really interesting question then. So now you're going, okay, well, what's next? So the next one is applying software practices to AI. So you've got this lovely AI services, and you realize that you have to integrate it into your application. And that means that it's got to tie into your pipelines. And you're about to discover now that pipeline means completely different things to different people. Apparently nobody in the world uses the same definition for pipeline. We just saw Antje talk about pipeline. Your software developers talking about a pipeline. They're talking about something completely different. You're not on the same page at all. So this gets really interesting then when you're saying, okay, I've got this application and I've got a pipeline here, and what is a machine learning pipeline and how do these fit together? How do I put this in my application? How do I test it? How do I hook it in with everything else that's being deployed? How do I find out if it's still working? How do I even know if it's still working? So those are massive questions. And those are things that you need to start to discuss sort of outside of just the software developers. And then there is a little bit of how it fits in with your application. Now, AI is all about how you use it. And so most of your application is still going to be good old-fashioned engineering, which is why sometimes those serverless APIs can be really good, because you've still got to build everything else if you're the developer. For instance, this lovely stack that we looked at. I'm going to do a quiz, Chris, and you can guess now. How many? There's four services in there. How many lambdas do you think are in there? That's a nice picture there.
A trick question here, huh? I go for 10.
For 10. What about you, Chris?
Well, there's 4, but there's at least 4. I'm going to go with 4.
There's actually 40 in there.
Is there?
Yeah. How many step functions do you think there are?
I go for 5.
There's 30 in there.
Wow.
And if I show you that this is what the mommy step function looks like.
Wow.
For uploading two photos and 1 video, how many times do you think Lambda got invoked? And we're looking at 6, machine learning services that got invoked there.
100.
100. Anyone higher, lower? So actually I was surprised. I had not guessed. So 2,208 times Lambda functions got run. And the step function transitions, there was 2,730. So there's still a lot of engineering that's not AI. And I know that's not exciting, but if you are a developer, you're still responsible for all of that. So the next things, which we will skip quickly through because they're very hard, there's legal, privacy, ethics. Nothing will make privacy and security in an enterprise more stressed than the words machine learning, right? So you need to understand what you're using well enough to explain what you're using and what's happening and where you're sending your data. And so that's a very different way of thinking about how you're using your data. What are you doing with your data? Than sort of the traditional, I capture it, we run it through some rules. All of a sudden, there's a lot more questions. And last but certainly not least is the changing user experience. So if you thought your UI and UX developers were, they were going to get off without needing to understand AI, no. I call this one hey, there's still humans to think about as well. AI really changes your mental models. There's a lot of explainability and trust work you have to do, and a lot of feedback and control. So anywhere where there is AI touching your humans, where they're interacting with it, you need to be very careful how you're explaining to them what's happening, what control that you're giving them, and helping them sort of understand, because there's ways that they're going to think about it that you necessarily, may not immediately think about. So this one is actually the best resources I have seen for user experience with AI, is the People in AI Guidebook by Google. So definitely, if you're interested, it's a really great resource. There's lots and lots of stuff in there. So without ever learning what XGBoost is, right, we start to really grasp the business value of AI and what it's going to take to use it for real in our enterprising applications. Which means that we can start then. Now we understand, okay, here's the business value, here's what I can use it for, here's what the challenges are. Now I can work out, where do I need to move down the stack? Where do I need to learn more? And we move forward whenever we reach our functionality limits. So service doesn't meet what we need it to do. The cost is off, and that can be for lots of different reasons. Or we find a differentiator. Because you never ever want to offload your differentiators. You always want to own those. So you've got understanding of how to evaluate where AI can be used, an understanding of how it changes your application, and hopefully a move towards common understanding and collaboration with your data scientists. And then hopefully we can have great conversations and cross-pollinate between those two groups. So software engineers can say, how do I do this? And, you know, data scientists can hopefully maybe take some of the engineering practices as well, which are new to some data scientist groups. I'm sure nobody on this call doesn't save their stuff in source control, but perhaps some people, you know, haven't yet started doing that in the data science community. And I think that is the real power there. So let's have a conversation about, I would be interested to know, I suppose, Chris, Antje, anyone in the chat, sort of what has been the best way you find to sort of bring people who are brand new to machine learning along, and sort of start them off without sort of dropping them in at the very bottom, and also what things surprised you most if you're talking to someone else from a different specialty in this field, either software or data science. Was there anything that you learned when you started working with them that you were kind of like, that's really crazy?
Yeah, great presentation, Gillian. Yeah, very, very thought-provoking, funny. Yeah, you know, so back when I got into machine learning, we didn't really have a lot of these, you know, high-level services. So I, you know, was forced to write my own XGBoost code or my own C code. And I would also like to point out too that the feature engineering part, and so this was actually a question I was going to ask you, is what kind of feature engineering goes into using these high-level services? Because I know when the times I've used Comprehend, the first couple times I would upload my CSV or point Comprehend to the CSV in S3, it was in the wrong format, you know, or it was needed to be encoded in some, you know, goofy format that like I wasn't familiar with. So some of that's gotten simpler, and I can make sure, just as long as my label is the first column in my CSV and then the features, the text is the second. So yeah, can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. So it depends on the service. Some of the newer ones, like Personalize or Fraud Detector, Forecasts, they very much, you do need to start to understand about your data, how the format of your data matters, which features you're going to put in. They allow a lot more features now, but early on you could only put in 6 features into Personalize, which meant you were looking at your data going, which 6 do I think are the most important? So once you get to those services, it's actually the algorithms and the running of it are offloaded for you, but really very much understanding your data and trying out different ways of like putting your data in different formats. So you're going to put one hot encoding in there, or, you know, are you going to bucket things, or that becomes quite important to understand, which you don't, like if you're using like recognition and you're throwing a photo at it, you don't think about it. Lex, you do start to learn about not feature engineering in this kind of traditional way, but what you put into your model makes a huge difference. And I've seen people say, oh my goodness, it doesn't work at all. And you have a look at their model and you're like, well, I can see why. I've also seen people do wonderful things like strip out all the stop words and stuff before they put it into Lex, which I can understand. They've gone and they've read up and they're trying their best, but now they have hurt themselves because they're giving it something the service doesn't expect. So the first one's poly, recognition, even comprehend. Although yes, if you start to use some of the custom comprehend and stuff, there is a lot of like things you need to go and check before you throw the file up there. And exactly like you, Chris, you get a nice error saying you didn't do it right. Your line is too long. It's not in the right format. It's probably if I read the documentation before I put through the data at it, I would find that out. But some of those later ones, the personalized, the fraud detector and stuff, feature engineering is a big part of getting them to work well for you.
Yeah, and Kendra, I think, yes, Antje, didn't you see this with Kendra, where we needed like a minimum of 1,000, or was that autopilot maybe?
Yeah, I don't think it's Kendra. It's autopilot. So some services need a minimum number of data points, of rows, to really like show the value. So sometimes you're running into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
comprehend custom I think needs 1,000, which
Oh,
is
maybe
a
that's what it
lot.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, which I actually tried it recently, and we labeled, I tried entity recognition. I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know how well this is going to work. And we labeled the data. We actually used SageMaker Ground Truth, which was the first time I'd used it for entity labeling. It was actually great. Everybody in the team really just loved labeling. It was, we just had the best day. Some people enjoyed it, some people did not. And we put it through, but actually we've got pretty good results. Though you do learn a lot about your data if you label it all yourself. You learn a lot about it.
And I can relate. That's what I did. I was doing a demo at a conference one day, and the evening before, I was checking in, like back in the days when we were still traveling, checking into a hotel, and I spent the night in the hotel basically labeling my data set for the demo the next day. So yeah. And once you start, I mean, you feel like you're obliged to finish. So I was sitting there and just labeling docs as docs. So pretty funny. And yeah, we do have some comments and feedback here in the chat as well. So to your question, Gillian, where to start? Start the easy way in ML first, do simple forecasting first, and then DevOps software engineers can start more easily. So that is coming here from the chat as well. So yeah, and people sometimes, I think, always refer to those higher level serverless AI services as kind of the beginners intro to machine learning, or like people who are not too familiar with AI and machine learning, because it just gives everyone basically a quick start in using those. But I think it's yeah, dangerous to be misled, because even if you're a machine learning AI expert, you don't necessarily always have to reinvent the wheel, right? So if there's a service that is matching your use case and does the job, why not using them, right, as a serverless service, and before you start reinventing and building it from scratch, given you would have the knowledge, but it just saves you so much time, and you can drive results quicker, which is also important. And I think also makes people happy to have results quick and spend a week developing and coding.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think that's exactly the point. I think it's like the butternut. It's okay to go buy your butter, even if you know how to look after a cow. Like what's already built, just use it if it works for you, and spend your time building what isn't there and what are the real differentiators for your stuff. Anything that's a service there, it's not a differentiator for you. It's already there. Anyone can use it. And so yeah, the AI services aren't just for beginners, and then you shouldn't be using them if you're not a beginner. Like everybody, take a look at them, and there is a lot of them that they let you customize them quite a bit. If you want, you don't have to kind of come out of the box, but there is a lot of settings you can go and tweak, and especially if you kind of understand what you're doing, you can start to sort of customize it quite a bit.
Yeah, one way I heard these high-level services being described is if you can offload a lot of the sort of easier problems onto these AI services, or more common problems, right? Like there's a lot of engineering, and as I've been at like Amazon longer and starting to meet more and more of these teams, I realized there is some very serious engineering that is behind comprehend and recognition, like you showed in Lex. And that's engineering I don't have to do, right? Or my startup, if I had a startup, I wouldn't want to focus on that stuff. I would want to offload, and I would want to focus on the really, really domain specific challenging problems and build those from scratch. So like thinking about it that way, if there's 2 or 3 models that you're trying to combine, this is a whole set of engineering that has been done by other people. And but on the flip side, for those of us that do have deeper ML experience, we might get frustrated by these AI services, right? And so I was curious, have you seen this at like Liberty, for example, or places that you've worked where maybe there's the hardcore data science team just will never even bother with these if they want to do everything from scratch? And yeah, do you have any tips on?
Yes. I mean, there is some hardcore data science who won't even use SageMaker. They won't even consider such a thing. So I understand it, but then I suppose on the software developer side, there has been a move towards, you don't have to build everything yourself. I'm going to spin up a Lambda, stick it out there. I didn't write the code. I don't care where it's running. That's not going to be my problem. So I understand the sort of fear sometimes that people feel like data science being devalued, or, it being commoditized is, it's not going to be as good as what they could build. And, people, it's a bit of a cop out. But I don't think there's any concern. I think that, there's always going to be need for the specialism. There's always going to be need for people who know how to write, really unique custom things. But also, I think, you have to embrace the managed stuff that's out there. You have to embrace the cloud. It's not going away. I think it's going to be a thing. You heard it here first. Cloud is going to be a thing. So as a developer, we're encouraging developers to go down and experiment with machine learning, go and start to learn what are the different algorithms, how do you build models, stuff like that. And I guess for the data scientists, I would say, come up the stack and experiment with like some of the more managed stuff. And even though you know how to do it, and maybe you could do it better, if you would write something better than comprehend, that's fine. Sometimes good enough is good enough. If you're getting 95% accuracy, maybe it doesn't need to be, 97. You don't need to go away and spend a month making it slightly better when you could be doing something else. And then I don't have to break out my Kubernetes and I can just call an API from my Lambda.
Yeah, just throw a couple more Lambdas in there. I have a fun personal question. What's your favorite U2 song?
My favorite U2 song?
Yeah, you have to like U2, right? Isn't it required?
Oh, I don't know if I have a favorite one. I didn't know this would be a requirement for this podcast now.
All right, well, yeah, maybe you can think about it. I think my favorite is probably One. Yeah, that song, it's been remade by a lot of people too. So yeah, it's always fun to hear like a rendition. Yeah, I remember like the last time I was in Ireland, actually, I should be specific. Yes, every time I've been to Ireland, the like taxi driver always points out the high school that like U2 went to, because it's like to or from the airport, I think. And so I think.
Have you been up to Northern Ireland though, Chris? That's the
no, I
the
haven't.
Thing there.
Yeah.
This is our.
Yeah, so this demo is super cool, and like this is a standard demo, right? Mm-hmm. That's available.
Yeah.
I've seen this. I think we actually did this at the Loft a couple times, and there's a lot of moving parts. I had no idea that there were that many lambdas and step functions involved.
I pulled up and I started looking through the CloudFormation, and I was like, oh, there's a lot going on in here. Fair play, like good job to the people who built it. If you know who it is, say great job, because it's a really nice sample app. And if you don't name your stack AWS or too long a name, it just stands up really quick.
Yeah, and I know someone else who is always running into that issue, right, Chris?
The 63 or 53 characters, because I name everything super long. This demo comes out of our media essay specialists, so the solution architects. I believe they're out of the East Coast, but yeah, this is even more full featured than the last time I saw it too. This is fantastic.
It's
But yeah, this does have Elasticsearch and all that stuff going on, doesn't it?
it does, yeah. There
Any
is another
tips?
media analysis one that can use Kendra, but it costs a fortune per day.
Yeah.
It's like $80 a day to run that bad boy. Which I, love it. Maybe not that much.
Yeah, yeah, there's always a balance there. Any tips on how to be notified that, so like beyond the normal billing, like alerts, are there service specific alerts, maybe like an alert I can put on Kendra or on Comprehends that this might be exceeding some threshold or is still running? Right.
Yeah, good question. I mostly just use fail fast billing alerts, but I guess I can see if you expected there to be certain costs that you're fine with. I do believe you can put it on at a service level, but I have not tried that.
Okay, yeah, and then you mentioned ground truth, and I posted a link, actually, our book, we cover ground truth. Antje took her hotel experience where she was labeling and translated that into a chapter for our book, which is really cool. And ground truth, also, you can use it with augmented AI, something that like we also, that we cover where ground truth can actually sort of auto learn. So as ground truth sees more and more of the like human labels, it can kick into sort of auto labeling mode. Have you used that at all?
So I did look at it, but it's in one of those ones you have to have a lot of data before you can even turn it on.
Yep.
Like it's at least 1,000, it might be more.
Yeah, I think it was like 5,000 maybe.
Yeah, that might be right.
Yeah. Okay,
so
gotcha.
I wasn't committed enough.
And
A2I,
right.
yeah, A2I, I've looked at your augmented AI. However, so we're an enterprise. So we have a lot of rules around what we can use, and a lot of the new services they come out, we can't use them until they're sort of ISO certified and lots of things. A2I is not certified of anything, so we cannot use it, unfortunately. We've actually Textract has only just got cleared because it just got ISO certified.
Oh, it did. Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
okay.
It's been out a while, but we couldn't use it. So we do. It is a shame we lag a lot on being able to like use them because we're waiting on being able to turn off the fact that it's using the data on Amazon side for learning and things like that, which you can now turn off completely across the board. So in an enterprise, it's always a little bit more fun to try to use anything new. Yeah. You can try it. It'll just take the rest of your life to get it into production because you'll be waiting for someone to sign off.
Gotcha.
This is Belfast City Hall, our office. Back in the day when we used to go out places and to offices and stuff. It's just behind here. So you'll have to come visit Belfast someday in the after when people travel again.
Then is Northern Ireland part of the EU, or what happened there? Things changed, right?
It's part of the United Kingdom, so
Gotcha.
I guess technically not part of the EU anymore.
Yeah,
it's been swept out with Brexit. Yep. Not fun because obviously we have a land border with Ireland, so.
Yeah, back in the day, I guess people used to drive up to Belfast to save taxes or vice versa, sales tax or something, right?
Yeah.
So that's coming back now, I guess. Interesting. Okay, I think we're out of time by about 15 minutes, but great chatting. Antje, do you have any fun questions for Gillian while we got her on the phone?
I think we're good to wrap here. I just had one question coming in the Q&A in Zoom, which I just put over here working on in Slack. So if people want to get started quickly just for experimenting and testing, if there's a way to test the services without incurring any cost, and I'll put in a link. So AWS offers something called the free tier, And not all of the services, but some of the services are part of that free tier, which gives you a certain amount of free testing, depending on the unit that the service is normally charged. So have a look at that free tier. There's always some good opportunities to get started with services.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Gillian. Yeah, great talk. I'll post this to our YouTube channel here in a bit, and we will talk to you soon.
Perfect. No, thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
And great job on the workshops as well. Amazing.
Awesome.
Thanks
Okay.
so much.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.